Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of our short and sweet eXact webinar series. Today we'll be talking about the how to maximize the use of the eXact. Presenting today is Richard Gray, Solution Architect at X-Rite Pantone. I'm Netta Goldfriend, Regional Marketing Specialist for EMEA, and I will be moderating today's webinar. A few things to go over before we get started. Due to the number of people that are attending today's webinar, we will keep everyone muted. If you have questions, please use the questions function on the GoToWebinar panel. We will have time to answer some questions at the end. Finally, this webinar will be recorded and you will receive a link so that you can review the webinar at your convenience. I will now turn it over to Richard. Rich?
Thank you, Netta. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar, our second in a 4-part series of a short and sweet webinar concept during this lockdown period. Second webinar, as Netta explained, is how to maximize the use of eXact. Those of you who attended last week saw an overview of the device and its main functionality. With this webinar, we'd like to go through in a little bit more detail about some of the key features and how they can be a benefit. What you're going to see is a series of slides illustrating a lot of these key benefits and also a little bit more about how they work. We're also going to be giving some links at the end of the page regarding the eXact and some supporting software, and also some of the key features that the eXact also holds. Again, some of these topics we did touch on in the last webinar if you saw it, and again it is available as a recording. However, we want to go into a little bit more depth this time, if you don't mind. In our experience, one of the most popular and probably useful aspects of the eXact is its ability to hold all of the latest Pantone libraries, plus also with a single point and press measurement, you can automatically display the closest Pantone search to any sample that you measure. Okay. What this will also give you is, firstly, as we said, what is the closest library color, but secondly, a list in increasing delta E of alternative matches. If, for example, the sample you're measuring is meant to match a particular Pantone but doesn't. And thirdly, also graphical analysis displayed on the handheld device itself as to if it is different or what you consider out of spec. How is it out of spec? Is it simply too dark or too light? Is it too red, too green, etc.? Again, in the last episode, we also covered the fact that it also comes with the latest version 4 Pantones released last year. We're going to do a further webinar next week on the supporting software eXact Manager, which comes complementary with the eXact, of how we can actually download these, synchronize them to the device. In addition to Pantone searches, for more simplistic CMYK tonal printing, there's also a very easy, what we call quick start menu for this as well. Okay, the screenshots you see below are typical of this. What does it allow you to do? Very simply, you can measure and auto find a cyan, magenta, yellow or black solid, and it will simply display a solid density for you. Okay, this can be in various different configurations. Plus also what the quick menu will also allow you to do is measure up to 3 different tonal patches. Typically these are defaulted at 75, 50 and 25% tonal areas, but it can be customized. What this will also allow you to do is either to express it in an absolute form, and you see on the right hand side a percentage of effectively tonal value, which is the density difference between a solid and a tint patch. Or we can configure these so the instrument will actually display what we term the tonal value increase, or dot gain or dot loss, plus or minus from a specific figure. Again, it's all very point and press, very easy to navigate. make a mistake, I simply come out of it, go back into it, and start again from fresh. Okay, so very simple and point and press. For those of you with a more complicated workflow, or wanting the ability to more automate the workflow in terms of overall measurements, then the eXact comes in a range of different options. Again, we're going to cover these in the future webinar in terms of the differences between the different models. But as you can see from the screenshots below, we can also have, instead of a simple handheld mode, we can have a supporting scan chassis. I can then scan and report back on an individual color bar. Or with supporting software and hardware, we can also put this into the offset market, scan of a full color bar, supporting key control aspects of that. Or, as you can see on the left-hand screenshot, we can insert in supporting software, this being X-Rite's color cert platform. We can do a customized bar where instead of measuring patches in sequence, we can skip patches, miss them out, in order to conform to an existing set of printed patches on a customer's substrate, retrofitting it essentially into a workflow. Other benefits, again, we mentioned Pantone standards earlier. For those of you not aware, that the Pantone standards also come with extra, what we would call metadata, or extra information, which would be useful to various parts of a workflow, both design and production. Okay. Simply measuring and finding the closest Pantone will also then give you this information. As you can see from the screenshots below, what do we get? We get an overall density. We get an estimated CMYK split for that individual Pantone reference. This is all Pantone data based around the offset libraries. We also then get embedded into the eXact an example ink recipe. If you're using Pantone blend scheme, then this is also the recipe which is also printed in the guide that you may be familiar with. Again, this is extra information which you may or may not be aware actually exists in these libraries. Very useful in certain workflows. Okay. In addition to perhaps a more traditional LAB style display, what is also very popular, certainly in the packaging and ink markets that we sell these instruments into, that the operator or the ink technician may also want to display the difference in an LCH, or lightness, chroma and hue display, as opposed to the traditional LAB axes that you may be familiar with. Again, how do we do this? It's a very simple menu function. This can be done through the user profile function in eXact Manager, which we will cover in a future webinar. We can simply, as you can see in the bottom left, very similar to your smartphone, we swipe left, we swipe right, we see the different menu options. It is that simple. Okay, so the device itself can be easily configured for different user configurations. Again, how to maximize the use of eXact. What else can we measure with the instrument itself? Not only can we just measure color, density, closest Pantone, like we described, lots of other supporting metrics. Again, very useful in certain industries. Again, an example is, what else can we do with the eXact Advanced model? We can also measure printed opacity. Very, very popular function, this. A lot of the time, this is used extensively in the flexible packaging market. Measure a printed white over a contrast card, e.g. Lunetta card. Measure it over black background, measure it over white background. We simply get a percentage returned back to us as the overall opacity of that printed coating. Higher the percentage, the more opaque the coating. Again, very useful for quality control, widely used in flexible packaging. Other metrics, as you can see from the middle slide, we have yellowness indexes, whiteness indexes, and various supported brightness indexes for measurements of paper stocks, either for paper production or incoming quality control on raw materials. It will also, based on the individual configuration of the eXact, allow you to measure percent or an amount of optical brightener and substrate. Again, this is useful for conformance to, for example, certain ISO workflows. One topic we didn't touch on in the last webinar is the calibration of the device. We mentioned about the individual white calibration on a daily basis, but how do we guarantee that our instrument is performing correctly over months and potentially years of use, and when I'm using it in a daily workflow to quality control all of my outgoing goods? What X-Rite offer is a solution for this called NetProfiler. What NetProfiler allows you to do is you can calibrate your device in situ at your customer base using supporting software and a supplied calibration card. What this actually does in practice is it compares the data from your instrument in its current condition with a set of master reference data held on an X-Rite server from this calibration card. The application then simply compares the two, and if the instrument, your instrument in situ, has drifted from the published calibration standard, it will create a mathematical correction or profile, applies it back to your instrument and all subsequent measurements for this correction. How is this a benefit? If you're producing product in more than one location, you can then guarantee the accuracy of these instruments on a weekly or monthly basis, making sure that you're conforming to all of your quality control procedures throughout the workflow. It's also widely specified in a lot of different global brand programs, which you may also be familiar or part of already. We did also mention on the last slide, the last webinar, that we mentioned about the best match functionality. I just want to spend a couple of minutes just explaining about that a little bit in more detail. The best match functionality, as the name suggests, gives an estimation of how close you can effectively get by adjusting ink concentration or coating weight of a particular measurement. What this actually does then in practice is it guides the operator or ink technician as to where to look first in terms of making an adjustment. Quite often when the human eye sees a difference in color, the first reaction then is simply to reduce or increase the strength of that color. What it doesn't do is take into account any changes in hue to that color. What it may be the case is that I could then make a strength adjustment and then still have a color problem. Therefore, the addition of that change in concentration or increased run length isn't actually necessary, because I need to then reformulate the color from scratch. What the best match feature does is take this guesswork out. It will give you a very accurate and close estimation as to, if I change the concentration, where would I be in terms of delta E? Would I be any closer? Would it actually be further away? This then, on a job-by-job basis, can save a lot of time and also a lot of unnecessary production and waste. Okay. Finally, we have various links here, one of which is the best match estimation and white paper, giving you a lot more detail as to this functionality of the eXact itself. We also have a link for the NetProfiler software, which gives you example videos and further information. Again, the eXact family generic link is here as well. And finally, again, for those of you who attended last week, we are currently offering our online fundamentals of color presentation as a free of charge course using the link below. You simply have to register for our website first of all. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. We'd like to open up the webinar to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Richard. All right. So if you have a question that you haven't submitted yet, you can submit it now in your questions panel. I will go over the questions now. We have first question here. Is it possible to make the entry screen for first use of the new device to set it to offset or flexo gravure business? It will eliminate a lot of errors for the flexo gravure customer who uses the default offsets settings. That is a question here.
Yeah, in a word, yes. What we can do, and this will be explained a little bit more in our next webinar, there's a functionality in the eXact Manager software to create what we call user profiles, and we can have multiple profiles on the advanced instrument where you can have different settings in each. So yes, that is possible.
Okay, thank you. Next question here we have, what is the difference between white index measure from Color IQC and from the device? If you can please explain the details between the two.
Yeah, sure. With Color IQC, this is our both packaging and industrial software platform. There are numerous different white indexes available, far too many to discuss on an individual webinar like this, but certainly we can follow up by email. In short, the eXact being what we call a graphic arts or 045 geometry will only support certain specific whiteness indexes, whereas some of the other supported metrics in Color IQC will both support 045 and sphere-based geometry. Okay, so for example, on the eXact device, the whiteness index will typically be a CIE index, whereas in Color IQC, you've probably got 4, maybe 5 different whiteness indexes to choose from. Okay, some of which will be specific to industrial, for example, textile workflows, rather than graphic arts.
Okay,
hopefully that's answered your question. Again, it's a little bit more complicated subject. Happy to discuss further via email if necessary.
Right. I think we have time for one more question, and we will follow up with the other questions we have received. Let's see our next question. Can you explain in short? We don't have much time, so we can follow up later. But can you explain dot loss?
Dot loss, yes, that's quite rare, to be honest. The vast majority of the time you will get dot gain with a process. It is possible in certain plate configurations that can happen, but it's very rare. Basically, the eXact will measure tonal value or tonal value increase by comparing the density of your solid patch with the density of the measured tonal patch, the difference being your dot area. If that was then less than the specified amount, say 50%, then it would be reported as a percentage below 50, for example 45. Therefore you would have 5% dot loss rather than an overall dot gain. Has to be said, that's very rare. I've only ever seen it personally with where there's been problems with specific flexo or offset printing plates, but that's how it works.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, that was the last question we have time for in this short and sweet webinar. Again, we will follow up if we didn't get to your question. You will receive also an email with a link to the recording of this webinar. Thank you all for joining and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you all.